Hello there, Shortcuts. Stephen here. This is list one for the price list, which will go out this Wednesday, the 23rd of October at 9 p.m. Now, you're going to have to get used to that cough because I'm struggling with a cough, and I will try and get through this next this discussion of this list as efficiently as I can. I have some lubrication prepared to help me if I lose my voice completely, but hope I won't because I love this list of records. This second half of this list is dominated by the blues. The first half has some classical, some of the greatest soul and funk of all time, and some spiritual jazz. And so let's see where we land. For those of you who don't know, the price list goes out 9 p.m. sharp Sydney time on Wednesday evenings, in this case the 23rd. If you would like to be on that list, drop me a note at shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. All right, I had the world's pain trying to figure out where to start this list. And I think I could have picked any of the top five, but I landed here. This is the German first press of Roots by Curtis Mayfield. This is Curtis Mayfield's second record on the famed Buddha Records label. It's in fantastic condition. I was listening to it earlier. It sounds great. Why did I choose this record? Well, those of you who've been in Shortcuts for a while know that I think Curtis Mayfield's run of records from his self-titled debut album all the way through This Is America Today to Back to the World, Roots, and of course Superfly, is maybe the greatest single run of soul and funk records in the history of soul and funk. I guess you could throw Stevie Wonder into the mix, but for me, I would choose Curtis Mayfield over Stevie Wonder any day of the week. Now, why Roots? Roots is his second album, and it is also his most driving album. The percussion and the bass lines, the fuzz bass riff that starts this record with the absolute classic first track, Get Down, is amazing and has been ripped off by so many artists. Or let's say borrowed, as opposed to ripped off, because it's such a classic sound, a buzzed up bass line, and that bass line drives the rest of that song and arguably the rest of the album. It is really up-tempo. It's in your face. It's got incredible percussion. And then you've got Curtis Mayfield's guitar playing and that singular high-pitched voice. The thing about this record, 7 songs, not one of them is filler. All killer. And, on any given day, my favorite can change. But I am going to call out the opening track to side 2, 7.5 minutes long, called Beautiful Brother of Mine. It is a groove. Now, many of you will know the Japanese press of Back to the World, that I think is up there in the top 10 Japanese presses I've ever heard. And I love that album. And I get why Superfly is so lauded, because in many respects, Superfly is the culmination of the first 3. You've got on the self-titled record these low-down grooves. On this record, you've got that drive and that modern view of the world and the activism that I love. And then on Superfly, you've got it all come together on a great soundtrack, and it just works. But of the first 3, this is the one that I think has stood up to the testament of time. Maybe I'm a bit over familiar with Superfly. This one I put it on and it always sounds so fresh, which is a terrible pun because of what's coming up soon. But anyway, if you don't know Roots by Curtis Mayfield, turn up your stereo, lay down, and let this thing groove. You know, Shakira would be shaking her hips. I can tell you now. It is an amazing album. All right, now we're going to come back to the funk. And I wonder if you've made the connection to the word fresh that I mentioned earlier. But a couple of detours before we get there. In many respects, this should have been the kickoff record. It's my own, I guess, taste that led us to Roots, Curtis Mayfield. But this is Karma by Pharaoh Sanders. Born Pharrell Sanders about 90 years ago now. And this is a sealed Acoustic Sounds copy. I've had it for a really long time, years, and I've never opened it. For those of you who aren't aware, the Acoustic Sounds series, American audiophile label, do just spectacular sleeves. Think of them, on a par with Tone Poet, Blue Notes, gatefold, tip-on, beautiful quality. They go back to the original analog tapes. They press 180 gram vinyl at QRP, which is probably one of the great, modern pressing plants. So tip-on gatefold sleeves, printed on high-grade board. Everything about this thing smacks the ultimate quality. So I had another copy that I still have, but I've kept this and I was saving it for an occasion. But then, as many of you know, this record turned up in the VMP Impulse box set that I bought, a while ago and received about a month ago, which I've been devouring. And this is in there. So now, one of you will have this album. Pharaoh Sanders' Karma. Pharaoh Sanders was an acolyte of John Coltrane. John Coltrane died tragically of liver cancer really young, 40 years of age in 1967. And there were three saxophonists at that time who were pushing the boundaries of, the sound that jazz makes. And Albert Ayler, Pharaoh Sanders, John Coltrane. Both Albert Ayler and John Coltrane died tragically young. But Pharaoh Sanders is probably the musician who picked up the ball and ran with it in ways that I think John Coltrane would have loved. John Coltrane's Love Supreme, he, in his liner notes, says it's a decree to God. And I have a friend of mine who's very spiritual and deeply religious, and A Love Supreme is his favorite album of all time. And I think it's because of what it attempts to bridge between the physical material world and another dimension. And Pharaoh Sanders, Alice Coltrane, and others created this genre of music that was coined spiritual jazz after the fact. When these musicians were making this music, no one really knew what to make of it. At the same time as this was happening, Miles Davis was making records like In a Silent Way, which I listened to front to back 3 times yesterday. And I'll talk about that another time. And that move that Miles Davis made into electric music creates a completely different atmosphere. There's a spaciousness. There's a tenderness of touch. You got a drummer like Tony Williams on In a Silent Way, who's maybe the most dynamic drummer ever, and he's there basically to keep time. It's kind of weird, but also magical. Whereas Pharaoh Sanders and Alice Coltrane and Sun Ra and these leaders were creating noise. The every every piece of your aural equipment is engaged because there's noise coming at you from all directions. Whether it be bells being shaken or Eastern instrumentation droning, so that there's always something that's there that's eating away at you. Whether it's Pharaoh Sanders' tenor sax chirping and cheeping and wailing, and at times hovering like I don't know, like a hammer. And so this is confronting music. This is 2 tracks. The first track, The Creator Has a Master Plan, is 33 minutes long. The second track, Colors, is a few minutes long, 4 or 5 minutes long. And it's basically let's put a full stop on this thing, because that opening monolithic track, Creator Has a Master Plan, is everything you need to know about Pharaoh Sanders and about spiritual jazz. It is bonkers. It is emotional. You can hear the anger. Remember, spiritual jazz is coming from a cohort of black musicians who had watched what happened to Martin Luther King, who were trying to deal with what it meant to be a black man in America in the same way that B.B. King was dealing with it in his music with Chains and Things, and Miles Davis was dealing with it, and John Coltrane. Pharaoh Sanders had a group of musicians who were angry. Vietnam War, all sorts. Sadness at what had happened to their mentor, John Coltrane. I think this music is not music that I can say to you that, will become something that's your daily listening. But there is an occasion when you sit down with a record like this, and usually with me, it's by myself. My wife's out, kids, or something's going on, and I go, right, I'm going to do this. And I sit down and I put something like this on, and it is a very, very unique experience. Anyway, let's move on to something very different. This is Petrushka, Stravinsky's ballet from 1911. Now, you weren't expecting that, were you? This is a sealed master sound copy, Japanese pressing, sealed, presumed mint, recorded by the New York Philharmonic. I brought this thing to the record fair at Glebe last weekend, and I don't know, 7 or 8 people who said, "Can I buy that?" No. I decided to hold it back for this group. There was a group member. I always take it as almost like a personal affront when someone leaves. There was a group member who left the group about a month ago, and he said, "You don't have any classical music, so I've kind of lost interest." And that was fair, because I think this might be beyond some soundtracks and things that I do, maybe the first time. But what a good one to pick. Stravinsky, Russian, born in Leningrad, but died in New York. Like a lot of these legendary Russian artists, find a way to escape. And he wrote this as a series of 3 ballets that finally, where I guess he realized his goal with the Rites of Spring, which came after this, in Paris in 1910, 11, and 12. When this premiered in Paris, Nijinsky, the legendary Russian ballet dancer, was the lead dancer. It's a very complex story that involves 3 puppets, as a lot of Russian stories seem to do. I've had the music on my Spotify thing on background over the last little while, but I do think there's somebody out there who will love this. Sealed Petrushka, Stravinsky. Japanese master sound pressing. Presumed mint, who knows? All right, now this one is mint. So, a short while ago, I met someone who has the most extraordinary collection of music. Much more to come on this. A lot of what I grabbed from him I've kept, and a few things are going on the menu. The first is this. And now you'll get the link back to Mr. Curtis Mayfield. This is fresh. Is it fifth or sixth? Maybe the fifth record by the legendary Sly and the Family Stone. And this was the follow-up to There's a Riot Going On. And it's a move on in terms of tone and sound. Look, it's different. Whereas There's a Riot Going On is a squally Vietnam War, murky, druggy den of iniquity. Fresh is not. How could it not be? Look at this. The opening track, In Time. I hear that and I think to myself, Prince must have inhaled In Time into his DNA because it's so Prince. But, you know, so many musicians love this album. I think it was, George Clinton loves this record, persuaded the Red Hot Chili Peppers to cover one of the songs on their second record. It's still got its dark edges, don't get me wrong. But it's very funky. It's very easy to consume. And here's the kicker. Most of this man's records have never been played. And in this case, you have a mint unplayed copy of fresh Sly and the Family Stone that's also a promo. Can you see that? It actually says, in home use only, not for sale. Now, I'm not quite sure how you get in home use only, but that's what you get in this case. So there you go. Very wonderful, beautiful thing. It is absolutely pristine. I'm not going to play it. Whoever buys this should be the first to play that record that's over 50 years old. All right, I'm going to cruise through these soul and blues records now. Many of you have this, Warm and Tender Soul, the debut by the mighty Percy Sledge. It's utterly wonderful. If you don't have it in your collection and you need to plug that gap, that Japanese pressing is beautiful. It is the one that I have. Now I have a slew of blues albums, and I'm going to go through them pretty quick. Now, this is the Essential Buddy Guy live record. This is Buddy Guy. Recorded at New Orleans House, Berkeley, California. With A.C. Reed, Bobby Fields, and a bunch of others. Now, what is notable about this record is that it is the UK first press on the Black Vanguard label, and it is in utterly fantastic condition. This thing is great. You can see, I don't know if you can see that where it says made in Great Britain. Sharp, bassy, kicks like a mule. Man, oh man, such a great record. This is Buddy Guy. Let's keep this going. I'm going to churn through 8 or 9 blues records that I really like. A US press of 1974, the Howlin' Wolves. Oh, Bowie. I think Bowie wants out. Give me 1 second. You want out, buddy? I'm gonna have to let him back in a sec. The Howlin' Wolves change my way. This thing is prime meat Howlin' Wolf. Whilst it was released, this particular pressing, I think is the 70s repressing. These are tracks that were recorded in his prime in the late 50s and early 60s. So you've got Love Me Darling, New Crawling King Snake, the title track, I've Been Abused, I Ain't Superstitious, My Mind Is Rambling, Doing the Do. Yeah, the very wonderful Howlin' Wolf, born Aberdeen, Mississippi, died in Hines, Illinois. Amazing album. All right. Next, we have the US first press of Can't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble in fantastic condition. This thing is absolutely pristine on the Purple Epic label. Cannot recommend it highly enough. Killer cover version of Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. I think, personally, I know a lot of people think that his debut album, Texas Flood, is his best. I think that's his best. But happy to have the debate. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now we have maybe the greatest bluesman that you might never have heard of in the Hall of Fame from I think he went in maybe 10, 12 years ago now. The wonderful J.B. Lenoir. Now, J.B. doesn't stand for anything. That was his name. That's what his parents called him, J.B. And this is a double album of all of the best of J.B. Lenoir. This is the great Chess Masters series that features Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and others. Absolutely amazing. If you don't know J.B. Lenoir, seek him out. Mama, your daughter's gonna miss me. What a great track. All right. Talking about, and J.B. Lenoir, he was, 38? Died of complications, I think, after a car crash. These guys don't last long. Freddie King, next guy, getting ready. The first of 3 records that Freddie King recorded for Leon Russell's Shelter label. Leon Russell playing on and producing this album. I don't know. I think this, again, is this Freddie King's best? Certainly got his biggest ever hit. The opening track on side 2, Going Down, is unbelievable. Living on a Highway, Worried Life Blues, Key to the Highway, which of course was written by Big Bill Broonzy, who connecting fiber to all of these folks. And, Freddie King, he died when he was, 39, 40? These people lived hard, died young, but left behind extraordinary music. Now I've got a series of 3 records. These are all Aussie first presses, and these are hard to find. The 1965 debut album by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. That's the 1968 third album by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. This one's called the amazingly named The Resurrection of Pig Boy Crabshaw. And then toward the end of their career in 1969, the Aussie first press of Keep On Moving. By this point, psychedelia being very much in play. These records are in great condition, particularly the first record, the self-titled, the only one to feature Mike Bloomfield on guitar before he went off to form Electric Flag, is in, I think, the last list of the 50 greatest blues albums of all time by, what's the name of that magazine? Forgot the name of it now. It was number 11. But it's also notably being consistently placed in the Rolling Stones record of the 500 greatest albums of all time. So this thing is a classic. The resurrection of Pig Boy Crabshaw is notable because it is less about harmonica and more about horns. It's very funky, very, very driven. Now, this, Better Days, is a mid-70s Paul Butterfield solo record, but it's not solo. It's still got some of the folks from the blues band, and so I put it there. So there's 4 Paul Butterfield records. And then finally, a couple of Shortcuts royalty. Great records that I know many of you out there own in the club. The absolutely brilliant and brilliantly titled, and what a sleeve, On Tap by Junior Wells. If you want to be convinced about the greatness of this record, put on The Train I Ride, which is the second track on side 2. I love it. Anyway, Japanese first press. All of those previous records, the Butterfields, are all Aussie first press. And finally, on You Know How Much I Love It, the Pink Probe label, 1972, the brilliant Guess Who by B.B. King, Japanese first press. So there we have it. List 1 for 23rd of October, Sydney, 9 p.m. Some spiritual jazz, some funk and blues. Yeah, if you'd like to be on the price list, drop me a note. shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. Please subscribe. Leave a comment if you found that interesting. If you thought I was talking a load of baloney, tell me that too. I love to know people are actually out there consuming this stuff. Anyway, I enjoyed it. Hopefully you did too. Bye.